Hello and welcome to another Daily Muppet. And on this Thursday during the international break, we're back once again with a lot of discussion over Eric Ten Hag already after 3 games into the season. We're also going to talk about Christopher Vivell staying at United, what that means, talk about the young players being targeted, go over a number of people to keep an eye on for next summer and in the next windows. As United will continue with their current theme of bringing in young, technical, talented players to continue rounding out the squad before they move into the final kind of phase of building the team, but more on that in a minute. Let's get right into it. First and foremost, we'll talk about Eric Ten Hag. Now, a couple of things that I want to make very, very clear, okay? Just to put it all correct, put it all in the right frame of reference. If you've watched any of my analysis and talk about how United play and the concerns that I have, you'll notice a bit of a theme to it. And it's because, I don't just blab my opinions because of no reason. I tend to give my opinions on the basis of information that I have on how things are going, including even how we play football. And I've said many times that when you take the Brighton game, I was unhappy with it. And people will say, well, we barely lost. We were this close. If we'd taken our chances, if we'd done this, if we'd done that, then we'd win. But that's not the point. That's not the issue. That's not really what this season is being judged by the current owners and the current management team of Wilcox, Ashworth, and Barada. That's not how I'm looking at it. We're not winning much this year, and that's not the measure of success. Quite a long time ago, I said that success in the next season or two may not look like what people think it does. And I stand by that pretty strongly. Because what is being judged this season is not whether we can scrape a few wins and accumulate 3 points here and there and get up the table in a fashion that is difficult, that is tough, that is done with pragmatic football. The test of this season with the new players coming in is whether we can implement a strong, effective game model that will be the right one to allow us to win multiple titles. You heard Omar Barada talk about that the idea is not to go and try to win one title and then disappear, but to win multiple and to remain at the top. And the two biggest aspects in accomplishing this are, number one, getting recruitment right, getting the right people in, the right players in. They feel they've done an excellent job so far in doing so and helping to start the huge reformation, reshaping of United's squad. And number two is having an effective game model, an effective style of play, whatever you want to call it, that is one that can win titles at the Champions League level, at the Premier League level, at all levels, that it will be there competing with Liverpool, with City, with Arsenal, who haven't won anything yet, but are competing in that space. That is the goal. That is the idea. And this season is not about scraping together 3 points. So when I analyze a game and I'm saying to you, and I get people putting comments and things, well, we were that close to winning, what's with the Doomerang? Because I don't particularly care. If we're playing constantly long ball style, try to just get in behind and score the way we've been playing for the last 3 years, and some games it works and some games it doesn't, it means nothing to me. That's all a failure. But that is also the view of the hierarchy, is it's not about, did we win, lose this one really tightly? Did we win this one, really tightly? Did we lose this one because of an individual mistake? That's not the point. The point in how Ten Hag is being judged this year and how this year is being viewed is, are we implementing this effective game model, this effective style of play, and are we seeing it show through to where we're playing better football? Because you can do that and lose games. That's the thing. They're not going to sit there and say, well, They're not. Winning and losing has less effect on this in terms of what they view as the way forward. Ten Hag can lose games this year. Ten Hag can absolutely lose games this year, and it's not like he's under pressure every time he loses a game. What will put him under serious pressure, and is already, is to implement the game model. And there are two ways that this cannot happen. It can be, number one, he's not carrying it out in game with the instructions, with the way he's setting up, with all of that. What he's putting together doesn't match what they want. That's one way. The second way is just in terms of, as a coach, failing to get across the ideas that are necessary in an attempt to implement the game model. Those are the two ways you can fail. And so far, and the reason I bring this up is this is how I'm judging the season. This is how I'm looking at it. Did the way we play stay consistent from game to game? Are we taking the same approach? Are we progressing forward regardless of opposition? Because again, we can afford to lose games. That means you don't have to adjust every single game to the opposition. We can afford to lose games. We can. That is the plan. We're going to lose games this year, but we want to be progressing. And so is there a plan forming? Against Fulham, we saw a bit more. The first game of the season, a high press, high line, fast attacks, a lot of possession in the opposition half. It went less in Brighton. Even if you think it was a good performance, I understand that. It was not the same game model as against Fulham at all. And it was even less against Liverpool, where it was even more long balls in behind. And that is the part that they're going to be unhappy with. But that's also the part that Erik Ten Hag is going to be judged by, win or lose. So I'm not going to sit after every loss and say, okay, well, that means Ten Hag has finished a terrible performance, all of that, just because we lost the 3 points. But it's the same, I'm not going to sit after a win if we didn't perform the way we should have and say, well, that means everything's good. It's a give and take, and there's a right balance. And Jamie Jackson wrote an article on this morning, and that's, just why I wanted to mention it, because it is totally accurate. What he said is totally correct. Ten Hag is under pressure because of the game model. It's not so much to do with the individual results here and there. The pressure is to implement the game model. That's what they want from a coach. It's been talked about many times. It is the point when Omar Barada says we want to win many titles and have something consistent, because you're not going for the one-off victory. You're going for a consistent way of playing that can maintain that level. And of course, having the financial things under control and the transfers to do so is a key part of that as well. And they are going to be unhappy with how it's gone so far in terms of the game model, because it's 3 games where United have looked totally different, where the press has been different, where the line has been different, where the buildup has been different, and where the attacks have been different. That is not a game model. That is the opposite of a game model. That is pragmatic play, and that is not what they want out of this season. And so that's where Ten Hag is going to have to make changes, and that's where he is under pressure, and that's where he does have to improve. And that's how I would recommend viewing this season. I understand it's frustrating. Everybody wants to look at the team and say, well, we want to win everything this year. But the thing is, there are going to be people on both sides of the discussion with Ten Hag that are going to give me grief over this, but it's the reality. Because you're going to have people saying, no, our team's good enough, we should be going and winning things. It's a failure if we don't win everything, if we're not competing. I disagree. And then you're going to have people on the Ten Hag side saying, well, no, this reason or that reason, if he scrapes a win, that's good. Getting the 3 points is all that matters. And I'm like, neither of those is pretty much correct at this point in time in terms of how they're viewing things. I understand we as fans it's been a long road getting here, but for the new leadership, the new executives, their goal is to actually start putting things right. They cleaned house this summer. They've gotten rid of numbers of players as well as numbers of executives and football people and individuals. I mean, by the day, I'm on LinkedIn connected to a bunch of football people at United, and every day there are more people. It's their last day at United. Those layoffs, the things, and it's not just like at the lower level, but mid, upper level, all across the football departments. So many changes afoot. They want to lay a new baseline for how United play football moving forward that is effective, and that's the most important thing, because that's something they can build on. And it brings you beyond the manager to manager thing. People say, well, if we change Ten Hag, then we're resetting again. No, that's not how it should be. Liverpool didn't reset, because a lot of the arguments people make is Slot walked right into a team that's well set up and it's working well. Exactly. That is exactly the point. He did. It's not a reset every time you change managers when you're doing things right. And that's what Ten Hag will be judged on. Can you implement that? Because we need progress. And whether he stays, whether he goes, whether it works, whether it doesn't, they want to see that happen. So that's their measure. That's what they're looking at. And so it's totally correct that he's under pressure on the basis of the game model, and it has to improve, and it has to improve fast. A couple other factors with this that I want to make very clear. Number one, anyone trying to paint a narrative that Ten Hag is being forced to play certain players, pick people, is a liar and is wrong and is talking out of their ass. Not the case. He has full autonomy over his team choice, over his selections, over all of that. And that will not change. And that, again, is the point. It's his job to do so. That doesn't mean they're going to step onto the training pitch and say, pick this person, play that person, do this, do that. It's all on him to pick the players. He has that autonomy. He was very bothered by, actually, the story last year that Wilcox came in and said, you have to play this way of playing, because it wasn't true. And I, at the time, said that's probably a bit of a half-truth. It's not correct. Wilcox didn't step in and say, you've got to do this, start these players, play this way, do this formations, or anything like that. They had discussions over the way that United could play and what might be some good ideas, but it was all about Ten Hag picking the teams and doing so, okay? So he deserves credit for those types of things, but you also can't take the blame off him and say someone's forcing him to pick someone or do something. It's bullshit. Not true at all. Who he's picking is who he believes will help him win the games most. Now, so that being said, that's where things are with Ten Hag. He's going to have time to turn it around. I don't know how much time. I won't say that. Last year, I'm not going to sit here every week and say, okay, well, now the pressure's on. Well, now they're talking about sacking. Well, now they're this and well, now that, because I don't want to do that. I'm talking about what they're looking at as a whole. Last season, there are many times through the rest of the months that I could have said they've decided to get rid of Ten Hag, and it would have been true, even though in the end they didn't. And you watched my videos, you know that I knew what was going on, and that the things that I said were eventually all revealed by The Athletic later. But I don't want to do that this season. I don't want to add to that every single game. The point of this whole segment on Ten Hag is to give you an idea of what is actually happening, what is being judged on, what are the views of the club and how they look at it. And in some ways, it's good for Ten Hag. He doesn't have to win every game, but he has to recognize that getting in that style of play is the most important thing. And if he doesn't do it, then they'll have serious concerns. Now, they want to especially give him, I think this period between this international break and the next one is going to be key, because he's going to have Ugarte in there, and it's not going to take him months to get fit. Xerxes will be fully fit essentially by then. De Ligt, Mazraoui will be fit by then. Most everybody's going to be back. Aside from Lenny Yoro, Rasmus Højlund will be back during this period. Luke Shaw will be back during this period. Mason Mount will actually be back in a couple weeks too. But Ten Hag will have pretty much every tool at his disposal, and even the arguments for Mazraoui brought in was so that they could handle this issue. So the left back excuse is not so much an excuse, because it was decided by all parties, including Ten Hag, that it was enough. Even with Shaw's injury, that with Dalot and Mazraoui, he was happy with those options there. So it's not an excuse there. But he will have all of these players in, and he will then be able to pick whatever team he wants and be able to put it together and show, can I implement a consistent, effective style of play? There's a couple of easy games in Southampton, Barnsley, then there's Palace, but then there's a lot of tough ones. Tottenham at home. Ten Hag has a really poor record against Ange so far. Away to Porto and away to Aston Villa. Those are 3 tough games between this international break and the next. And so he's going to have a few weeks to sort it out, to get it right, and go into those games and produce some results. So that's what we're going to have to see. Moving on with that, and in line with all of this, Christopher Vivell is set to stay at least on through January. One of the things he was involved with heavily was the departures, not so much just the signings, but the departures of a lot of players and finding landing spots for them and moving players out, which I think was a huge success this summer compared to prior ones in getting these deals done. So he's set to stay. for a bit longer. I think he'll probably end up being permanent. We saw Andy O'Boyle depart, so there's obviously more space for him to be in the executive in the hierarchy there. Further looks at young players and watching young players and future targets is certainly something that'll focus on, and setting things up so that United are moving forward into the future. Maybe he'll be there to assess things like the overall structure, game model, things like that too. Maybe he'll be there to look at as well, the multi-club model. Obviously for now, we can't really do much with Nice being in the same competitions, but that should end at some point. As well, you have Lausanne, and if there's other clubs that in the end could be part of that. So there's a lot of things that Vivell could do, but I think based on how the window went with his involvement, it was a success. Young players, I want to talk about that, and then I'm going to get into a bunch of future targets, because as we saw this window, United cleared out a lot of the older players and reduced the average age, bringing in mostly players under 23, with De Ligt, Ugarte, Yoro, Xerxes, Mazraoui, the oldest player on a cheap deal, but shifting a lot. And next summer, they'll be shifting more in terms of the average age. Lindelof over 30, Eriksen over 30, Casemiro over 30, Maguire potentially, over 30 as well. So they're going to continue lowering this average age of the squad significantly over the next few years. And definitely a big focus in the next window will continue to be to bring in young players, next two windows, I should say, because we could be active in January. Next two windows would be to bring in young players who are similar veins to Yoro, to Xerxes, to Ugarte, and to De Ligt to some degree, though he's probably the most established of all of the players that we've brought in, right? Is players who are very good, who are young, who have high developmental ceilings, who have high technical and physical levels, and continue to develop them moving forward. That will be a focus, and that, of course, could be a big part of Vivell being involved. There's kind of two stages to transfers and to building a squad is you do that, and then sometimes then you're ready to get like those cherry on top players, like the Paul Pogba type players, where we should have signed him when we had a team that was much more ready, right? When you can get those type of players, or the Rafael Varans, when they can come in when you have a team that's well set up and established, and they can be most effective, and even Casemiro's. So that'll be my understanding of things, is that the next couple of windows is still going to be focused on rounding that out, because we still have a fair number of positions to look at where we need more youth coming through. Not necessarily youth, but young players coming through. And then maybe one signing in the area can top it all off. But, in the midfield, we need players. We need players for the future in the midfield. 2, maybe 3. We need fullbacks. We still need probably wingers. And so there's a few different positions, because if you look at it, really, even on the wings now, we've got Rashford, Garnacho, and Ahmad. And that have played really this season. And we'll see how it goes with everybody. But we need more options, certainly, for the future. And then, so looking at the next January and into summer, and I think that's a big part of Vivell for sure, is to continue to look at in this approach. So what are some of these future targets I want to talk about that we should keep an eye on? And many of them are on my chart that people laugh at, which is very amusing to me. One, because it was about mostly a bunch of links from journalists as well. But regardless, I'm happy with the chart. I'm going to do it again, and people can do whatever they want with it. Because similar to scouting lists, you're going to have big lists of names, and then you may not get any of them. But many of them continue to be targets for the future. Now, it was really interesting because by the end of the last time I did that video, I narrowed them down quite a bit. And a lot of the names that were left on there are still names that I would consider for the future, and that I've been working on kind of confirming that we're still interested in, still watching, still observing for the future. So definitely ones to keep an eye on. So I'm going to go through a few of them. Starting with the left back. The 3 names I had left over at the end of the year were Anthony Robinson, Kirkes, and Ait Nouri. We will be looking at left backs and keeping a close eye on it, especially, if Luke Shaw comes back and he gets injured again. I think we'll be going for one in January. But Anthony Robinson, Kerkez, and Ait-Nouri were the three left on my list there. I did note there was an article saying that United were interested in looking at a move for Anthony Robinson in January. I don't know if they will, but as I said at the end of the window, they can be active in January, and I would expect that to be a position they look at should things not go the way we hope with Malacia and with Luke Shaw. The other name I would add to that list is definitely Miguel Gutierrez, who been talked about before, could be of interest next year. Now, does this mean these are the only lists? No, of course. It's September 5th. We just ended the last window. They're going to be looking at adding more names, scouting, doing lots of things over the course of the year. But those are 4 left backs I would keep an eye on for now, between now and next summer. Kerkez was confirmed by Fabrizio Romano this summer as someone we were interested in watching, but we decided not to spend there. 2 other names I mentioned in my pre-match review, pre-match live on Saturday, that I have talked about before and that have come up in stories are young sort of attacking midfielders, which I think is an area of interest for United because, we saw with Bruno talking about his new contract that it was only really an extension of a year. That means 2 years from now, they might be looking at replacements and they may not feel they have somebody in-house who can do it. At that level. So they're looking. And the 2 names that I'm going to keep in mind in terms of young players are Mastantuono. We talked about him, I think, in April or May as someone United were looking at, that Madrid were looking at. Madrid have ended up not signing him. So someone United are still interested in, still watching. We still have yet to actually do that kind of South American market approach and getting these players in. But Ashworth was big on it. Obviously, we know Christopher Vivell is big on looking at different markets. So, and Wilcox too. So hopefully, that's one to keep an eye on. And then the other one was Nipan at the Norwegian club that we played. Someone definitely interested in joining us. Someone we're definitely interested in having. There's been discussions about one for the future. Maybe something to talk about in January. Maybe something to talk about in the following summer or January. But definitely one to keep an eye on. Another name to keep an eye on is Hayden Hackney, playing under Michael Carrick. A 6'8", maybe more of an 8, but definitely someone who is developing really strongly under Carrick and in very Carrick-like ways in terms of his skill set and abilities. United have been watching him for some time, someone to keep an eye on, more midfielders for the future. Obviously, we've talked about Adam Wharton as well, but that is another name I would keep in mind, Hayden Hackney, in addition. In terms of that midfield. Obviously, we know Gerard Braithwaite continues to be someone they would like for center back next summer, and I would still keep him towards the top of our list in terms of potential Maguire replacements, especially if things keep going poorly for Everton, because they might need that money sooner rather than later. So that's like left back, midfield, center back targets in terms of a lot of young players. Not the only ones, but ones definitely to watch. In the forward line, there are names that we've talked about in the past that continue to be of interest. One of them is Asani Diao. Real Betis, I don't know if he made a move. There was discussions over him making a move somewhere towards the end of the window. Maybe it was to the Dutch league, but to Feyenoord? I'm not sure. I don't remember. But Asani Diao, someone to keep an eye on. There's other names as well, but very talented, very technical right winger. And there's other names that we've talked about in the past, like Nusa and others, but he's definitely one I would keep watch on at this point in time. So there's a lot, and in some videos coming up over during this break, since we have time, I want to break down some of these players and do I'm not going to do it in this video because it's already 24 minutes, but I want to break down some of these players, what kind of players they are, what they bring to the table in more specific, because I think what it helps us see is the type of profile that United might be looking for, even in young players, though they're flexible for these types of positions. And obviously it's very early, but I'm going to keep talking about them as we go forward, because if you follow from previous years, you actually know this. A lot of the names we talk about at the end of the last window tend to be targets in the next window. And that's not unusual, especially when you're talking young players, because you want that consistency. If you're trying to build a team and these are the players that fit, they should fit next year. If you're building a model, a consistent way of playing, and through the year, a lot of times names come up, and sometimes there's surprises. But it's like Ugarte, for example, was a target last year, and then we didn't really talk about him through the year because he just signed for PSG, but then became available at the end of the season. He snapped up as the top midfield target. Well, he was a target from earlier, and that can be like that all the time. So definitely keeping an eye on all of this, and we'll keep adding to these lists, building them out, sometimes striking them off as we go through the season, but also because I expect us to be active, potentially active, not for sure, but potentially active in January, depending on how the next few months go. Otherwise, I'm going to continue, and I really do appreciate, anybody who watches these videos. I understand all the videos I make aren't filled with news and things outside of the windows, but, I don't just make videos to just express my opinions, but based on the information that I have. So when I talk about Xerxes and I do a video about what kind of player he is, I am putting in there solid information about why they signed him and what they want him for. And when we talk about the whole game model and things, is he being used effectively? Is the plan being set up correctly to get the most out of him? Those are interesting questions. And so I'm going to have more on Ugarte, on Delict, on Euro, on others as well. But as in a general sense, I just appreciate, anybody who watches my videos, supporting me by watching those as well, outside of the window. Obviously, there's just less interest in the things that I put out, but I definitely appreciate the people who do watch that and everything as well. I've talked to people, around my contacts club to find out, their views on the different problems, their views on the different tactical things. And so when I put stuff out, I understand that, again, in that sense too, that it's not always the most exciting. And it's not really what you come to me for, but it isn't just my opinion when I say these things, and that's why I think they're worth listening to. I don't think my opinion is that worth listening to, but I do try to formulate it based on the information that I have. Appreciate everybody who's attended the watch-alongs, and we'll continue those, and soon it'll be public where you won't have to sign up and add some more really cool features, but it's been a lot of fun. I'll be doing some videos on some of the players we've signed and how we wanted to use them and all of that, and how it ties into our game model. I'll do some videos on our targets, moving forward, and then obviously updates on anything that changes with the manager side of things, with the player side of things, with anything else, because frankly, a lot happens through the season, as you know. I mean, I can't remember a time in the last few years where we went more than a week or two without there being some very strong things to discuss, whether it's about players or manager styles or views or what they're looking at in coming windows and all of that. So thank you all for watching. Thank you all for supporting me through the window, and as well continuing to do so outside of the window. And I will see you all in the next video. Make sure to like, comment, subscribe, turn notifications on. See you later.